About 10,000 years ago, on the shore of a lake in East Africa, 27 people died in a single afternoon. Not from disease, not from an accident. They were hunted down one by one and killed where they stood. This wasn't a hunting accident. This was the oldest battlefield ever found. And it's about to change everything you think you know about your own species. The place is called Nataruk in northern Kenya. In 2012, a research team led by archaeologist Marta Mirazon Lars stumbled onto something buried in the mud near a dried-up lake bed. At first, they thought it was an animal kill site. Then they started counting bodies. 27 skeletons. Men, women, children. 10 showed clear signs of violent trauma. Skulls caved in, ribs shattered, throats likely cut. 2 skeletons still had sharp stone points embedded directly in the bone. One lodged in a skull, another buried deep in a chest cavity. One woman had her hands bound before she died. Bound 10,000 years ago, and someone still thought to tie her hands first. This happened before farming, before cities, before anyone on Earth had ever built a wall or raised an army. These were hunter-gatherers, living the exact same way humans had lived for hundreds of thousands of years before them. And someone decided to slaughter an entire group of them in an afternoon and leave the bodies where they fell. For decades, most anthropologists assumed war simply didn't exist before agriculture. The theory made sense on paper. Hunter-gatherers moved constantly. No permanent land to defend. No stored grain to steal. No cities to conquer. Why would anyone fight a war over nothing? Nataruk broke that theory apart in one afternoon of digging. Because if hunter-gatherers were killing each other in organized, brutal numbers 10,000 years ago, then war isn't something civilization invented. It's something civilization inherited. And once scientists went looking for more proof, they didn't have to look far. In 1964, archaeologists excavating a site called Jebel Sahaba along the Nile in Sudan uncovered a cemetery of 61 skeletons dating back roughly 13,000 years. Nearly half showed signs of violent death. Stone projectile points were found lodged in skulls, buried inside pelvises, driven through ribs. Some victims have been shot multiple times from multiple directions. They didn't die in a single clean strike. They were surrounded. For years, researchers debated whether Jebel Sahaba was one horrific event or something worse. A slow accumulation of violence, stretched out over generations. In 2021, a new analysis using modern imaging settled part of the question. Many of the wounds had already healed before death. These people had been attacked before, more than once, across their lives. This wasn't a single massacre. This was something closer to a war that never fully ended. It just paused between rounds. That detail matters more than it seems. A one-time massacre could be an isolated tragedy, a single terrible day. Repeated violence, old wounds healed over new wounds layered on top, starts to look like something else entirely. A pattern, a rivalry passed down, a conflict older than any of the people currently fighting it even remembered starting. And it wasn't just Africa. In 1983, construction workers in the German town of Talheim uncovered a pit filled with skeletons. 34 people, men, women, children, some as young as infants. This burial dated back about 7,000 years to one of Europe's earliest farming communities. At first, archaeologists assumed it was a mass grave from disease or famine. Then they looked closer at the skulls. Nearly every one showed blunt force trauma from stone axes delivered from behind, execution style. Several skeletons had healed fractures from earlier violence layered underneath the fatal blow. Whoever attacked this village didn't just want to win. They wanted no one left to retaliate. Entire families were killed together, buried together, in the same pit their killers likely dug for them. 3 sites, 3 continents: Kenya, Sudan, Germany. Thousands of years and thousands of miles apart. And the exact same pattern again and again. Groups of humans organizing and turning that organization into something designed purely to end another group of humans. So why would people with nothing to steal, no cities, no stored wealth, go to war at all? The answer might be simpler and darker than economics. Territory wasn't property back then. It was survival. The best fishing spots, the most reliable water source, the richest hunting ground for miles. During drought or environmental stress, when resources shrank, competition between neighboring bands could turn lethal fast. Nataruk sits right beside the evidence of a drying lake. The water was disappearing, and when the water disappears, so does the food, and so does the patience. But there's a colder possibility, one that goes back further than Nataruk, further than Talheim, further than any human at all. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, do something disturbingly similar to warfare. Male chimps from one troop patrol the borders of their territory, and if they find a lone male from a rival group, they don't chase him off. They kill him, slowly, deliberately, sometimes 4 or 5 attackers against one, holding him down while the others take turns. Jane Goodall documented this firsthand in the 1970s, during what researchers now call the Gombe Chimpanzee War. Over 4 years, one chimp community systematically hunted down and killed nearly every male in a neighboring group, one by one, patrol after patrol, until the rival troop simply ceased to exist. It wasn't chaos. It was methodical, scheduled, patient. Think about what that means. No language, no ideology, no flags, no kings, no reason beyond "you are not us." And still, an organized, sustained campaign of lethal violence against outsiders. If chimpanzees can do that without a single word ever being spoken, then maybe the instinct for group conflict didn't start with humans at all. Maybe we didn't invent it. Maybe we inherited it, the same way we inherited fear of the dark, or a taste for fat and sugar, or the urge to belong to a group of people who feel like us. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Alongside every piece of evidence for ancient violence, there's an equally large body of evidence for the opposite. Cooperation, alliance, peace, sustained for generations, between groups who had every reason to fight and chose not to. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Jew/Hoansi of the Kalahari, have documented complex networks of peaceful trade and marriage stretching across hundreds of miles, between bands who were total strangers to each other. These networks weren't accidents. They were built on purpose through gift exchange, shared rituals, and intermarriage, specifically to defuse the exact tension that leads to a Nataruk or Talheim. In other words, ancient humans didn't just know how to make war. They also engineered peace deliberately, using nothing but conversation and relationships because they understood exactly what the alternative looked like. So which one is human nature? The bound hands at Nataruk or the trade routes of the Kalahari? The uncomfortable answer is both. The capacity for extreme violence and the capacity for extraordinary cooperation appear to have evolved side by side, in the same species, often inside the exact same communities. We are not a peaceful species corrupted by civilization. We are not a violent species tamed by civilization. We are a species built to do either one, depending entirely on circumstance, scarcity, and fear. Look at Nataruk again, knowing that. Those 27 people weren't killed by monsters. They were killed by other humans, living the exact same way they were, capable of the exact same warmth and cooperation you'd find in any peaceful camp on a normal day. Something tipped the balance. Scarcity, fear, territory, maybe an old grudge nobody alive today would ever fully understand. And on that particular afternoon, the balance tipped toward violence instead of alliance. The same thing happened at Talheim, 7,000 years later, 3,000 miles away, to people who had never heard of Nataruk, who had no idea it had ever happened. Different continent, different tools, same balance, same tip. 10,000 years later, the pressures have changed almost beyond recognition. Cities instead of camps, nations instead of bands, nuclear weapons instead of sharpened stone points and stone axes. But the underlying machinery, the part of you capable of both slaughtering strangers and building alliances that stretch across hundreds of miles, that machinery hasn't changed at all. We didn't replace it. We just gave it better tools and higher stakes. So the next time you hear about conflict somewhere in the world, and it feels like some uniquely modern failure of humanity, remember Nataruk. Remember Talheim. Remember the bound hands, the arrowhead lodged in a skull, the drought that dried up the lake before it ever dried up the peace. That capacity was already inside us 10,000 years before the first nation ever existed. 10,000 years before anyone had a word for war, or a word for peace, or a reason to choose between them. We didn't invent it. We inherited it. And whether we override it or give into it is still being decided every single day in every single one of us.